anyway, welcome everybody. This is really, I was so terrified when I saw the rain come down. I'm like, oh God, this is going to kill attendance. But this is really a very good turnout, and we're really happy to see this. You guys and gals going to make this work. This is something that we have been very interested in. Redeveloping the whole Route 36 corridor. We think it's pretty much a blank canvas that we can really fill in to create a masterpiece, and that's what we're hoping. This is the first step in identifying what needs to be done. And before she walked past the entrance table, gave me 2 ideas. So that's a good thing, and we really want to get everybody's input on what you would like to see here. What your vision is for Route 36. It's sort of a unique feature of the town. In as much as anybody who lives near there knows, May to Labor Day is a common line going to San Diego, which is a good thing because that means we have attractions here that people want to utilize. It's the rest of the year and other elements in the summer season that we really want to bring to life here. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the experts here. They're going to explain how the process works, how we're going to gather the information, and what the follow-up is. So thank you very much. And this is Tony Mercantante. He's our Township Administrator.
So thanks for coming, everyone. I just want to just kind of go through why we're doing this, how we got to this point, and why we want to get your participation in this. So we all know Route 36 is a kind of a complicated road. It goes through several different neighborhoods, and you'll see we have stations set up with the different neighborhoods. And it's got a lot of unique issues. It's very different from Route 35. I mean, obviously those are the 2 state highways we have in Middletown, but you can see they're very different. And a lot of people say to us all the time, well, geez, why can't Route 36 be made to look nicer? Why can't there be newer businesses there? Why, if something's being built on Highway 35, people go, why can't something be built down on Highway 36? It would be a nice thing to have. So 36 has some unique challenges to it. One of the biggest issues is that most of the properties are a lot smaller than the properties on Route 35, so they're a lot harder to develop. There are a lot of old businesses that were there for decades, and you know, in the 60s and 70s they started closing down. But they're small properties with small buildings that really have no functional use anymore. So how do you figure out a way to get those properties revitalized and reused when they don't meet any standards that normally you would use nowadays? So we wanted to try to come up with some creative ideas. The other thing that's different about Route 36 is, well, a couple things. One is there's got a section of Atlantic Highlands that intercedes into Route 36, and then you're back into Middletown when you get through Atlantic Highlands. And the other thing is there's a lot of residential use along or very, very close to Route 36, certainly much closer than you have on Route 35. So that makes it different too. So Route 36 is almost a mixed-use corridor. So we figured we would get, we saw the opportunity to get a grant, and I'll tell you one thing. One of the few good things that came out of Hurricane Sandy is that they did make funding available to do studies in areas that were potentially prone to flooding, which Route 36 is, so that we could look at how to revitalize those areas, but also how to develop them in such ways that they'll be more resilient, more flood protected. So that program enabled us to get some funding to do the study, and you're required to hire consultants to do the study. You can't do it yourselves. So we hired consultants who will take you through this. And the idea here is to invite people who live and do business along Route 36 and in the neighborhoods, because you're the most impacted people, and you're the people most familiar with it. So the idea of this is that almost everything is on the table. Okay, there's no crazy ideas, really. If you think of something that might work in an area that you're familiar with, on a property that you're familiar with, say so. So think of it that way. The whole idea is to get your input. We didn't want to come up with a plan for Route 36 and say, hey everyone, here's the plan. We wanted to say, hey everyone, help us develop a plan for Route 36 that will work. And then when you're participating in it, then when it comes time to implement, most people should be familiar with it and aware of why we got where we did it. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. Debbie Lawler is the lead planner on this project from Mazer Consulting. This is San Siobhan. San is the planning director of Middletown Township. So, you know, we all are kind of working on this together, but the consultant, and she'll introduce her whole team. She has a team of people here who will work with you in different groups, but she's going to go through a short presentation before we get to that. And again, thanks for coming, and we really hope you give us some good feedback during this process. I'll tell you one thing, we did this a couple months ago for another area in Belford, and it was the same thing. We got a great turnout, lots of people came, lots of people here participated. You actually get to draw on maps and come up with your own ideas, so it's kind of nice to see this kind of participation, so thanks.
Thanks, Tony. As Tony said, my name is Debbie Lawler, and I'm with Mazer Consulting. I head up our planning department, and tonight I have 4 other planners with me that will be at the different tables to help facilitate the discussion. I have Austin Bajan in the back, Zach Zalman, Dan Block, and J.D. Felicis. A number of us have experience with green infrastructure that you can discuss with us even if you're at another table, and that deals with how to become more resilient in an area that may have been impacted by flooding. I love working on projects like this. I'm very passionate about this, and I've talked to Sam before. Any town that reaches out to a community to ask for their ideas in a community setting like this, I just love working on projects like this. I'm a commissioner with the American Planning Association. That's another hat that I wear. And I lead up our national program on community planning assistance programs. And it is so important to reach out to the community for their input. You know your community better than anybody else. You know changes that you might have ideas that can work, that you may want to see take place. And that's what programs like this are all about. So when funding comes about and a town jumps on it, it's very important for us to be listening to what you think we can do. And in this particular program, this particular grant, we're looking at the stretch of Route 36 that we have here, and we're looking at 5 different centers in the different neighborhoods. And I'm just going to quickly go through this and explain a little bit about, Tony mentioned, the ground rules for this is that everything's on the table. Everybody's opinion counts. There is nothing wrong that you could be saying. And everybody is nice to each other when you're at the table, okay? We don't want anybody jumping down somebody's throat saying, oh my God, you can never do that. Tell us what you think and we'll see what can work. We want to hear your ideas and we'll try to piece everything together as we're working on it. This was the impact of Hurricane Sandy and the flood surge that took place. As we're going through, there's 5 centers that we're going to be looking at. And they each have a name, and there's the centers that you know very well. But when we went through, they're not connected, okay? They're based on intersection areas. They're based on a stretch that we think you'd be able to look at and give us input. But there's going to be areas where we think that money can be concentrated and make improvements being made, but they're not contiguous to each other, okay? So you have the North Middletown, and we have boards at each table. So as I'm going through, these boards, when you sit at a table and select the table that you're at, you'll be able to see this again. You'll see a map, and then you'll see these exact boards. On the map, there'll be numbers, and when you see a number like this on these photographs, that's where they're located on that map that you're going to be seeing. This map also has the land uses, the current land uses, the areas that have parking and buildings on them right now, and also in the corner you see what is considered a walkable score at this time. Okay, it's called a walkability score. And this is really interesting. It's something that is a rating that sometimes you'll find this online. Okay, the interesting part about it is that right now this area has a 57 out of 100. That means that there's connection points that are missing. You can't easily walk this neighborhood and get from one place to the other. There's improvements, there's a lot of room for improvement. And that's what we want to hear. Are there gaps in sidewalks that maybe you think that you have suggestions for? Is there a connection to the bike path that you want to make while you're talking to us? Do you think that there's things that there should be ways of getting to a school or to a shopping area? These are things that we want you to be telling us about. We also want to know where it's difficult to cross the highway, okay? Because you're trying to get to an area that you have access, you may be able to reach it by a traffic light, but you don't really feel that it's safe to do so. As a pedestrian especially, this is what we're looking at. Okay, and you'll have that on your table also. Again, you'll have Port Monmouth intersection area, center area, and on the maps, the person facilitating your table will show you there's major intersections at some of these that we concentrated the centers around. With it, when you walked in the door, you also got a list of potential land uses that when you were there, we'll be talking to you about things that you may want to see. These are some land uses that are just ideas. You may have more specific land uses, you may have other land uses that you want to suggest. You can put check marks right next to these if you have an idea. We'd like you to put the center name at the top of the table that you select so that when you give this back to us, we'll be able to use the information. And you also have a list of direct questions that you'll be going through at each of the tables. Again, you'll have a map. Same thing with the Belford area, Leonardo, and Avenue D. Okay. Just to give you a little bit of an idea of some of the design principles that we're looking at, some of it is repurposing the strip commercial areas, as Tony was saying, with mixed uses. There are areas that have become more successful in town by putting things like residential over commercial. Is that something that you want to see? Do you think that it's possible? Do you think that if we allowed for areas to be consolidated in some way, grouping the parking by allowing the lots to be brought together and not having every single lot to have the parking and allowing access to go between the lots, working together as property owners to make it more of a villagey type of a feel, walkable, maybe moving, parking behind it. Talk it through and think of it more like as if it's not individual structures on each lot. Is that possible? Okay, these are some ideas. Do you want to see different types of housing? Do you think it's even possible to put more housing on Route 36? These are things that we're interested in finding out about. Do you think that these are all different types? Residential type of units that could be more apartment-like? Do you think that your children have the ability to move in town? Can they get an apartment? Can they find one? As people are growing older in town, do they want to stay in town and not have the ability to move into downsize? Is there something like that that you'd be interested in? Do you think that you need senior living in town? Could it possibly be somewhere along that roadway? Are there commercial type facilities, small, large, light industrial? Types of retail, again, smaller type, street front type, walkable cafe type of things that could go there. If we went in one block off of Route 36 and made these lots larger, could that bring some more vitality, more usable lot sizes as you move forward into the future? These are some of the things that have been raised already in terms of like marking off places that people would walk. Is there ways of making the sidewalks more accessible so that people actually do use them more? Bus stops that are actually shelters, better wayfinding or signage where you know that you're entering into a community. A lot of times when you're going into a town, you see, the welcome signs, and the signs may have a symbol of the municipality. We want to talk to you about how do you brand your neighborhoods? You know, is there a sign or something that the town is known for? Is there something that the neighborhoods are known for, some individuality that you think when you see banners on the poles? Are they neighborhood by neighborhood? Should they be something that's all of Middletown as you're going through? What are your thoughts on that? Again, there's different types of light poles, different ways of making the curves and medians. Does this have to be a Jersey barrier going down the middle of this? And Tony and I have had this discussion. So these are the types of things that we want to be discussing as we go from table to table. You're going to have a little over an hour or so to discuss a lot of these factors, and the person at your table will be facilitating it time-wise and moving you along through this discussion. The main thing that we want to do is get your ideas of land uses on the table, and we're going to be going through the charrette questions. The one thing that I'd like to ask is that at each table, somebody volunteer to help be the scribe at these boards that we have, to help take down some of the notes as our facilitator is working through the questions with the group also. It helps a little bit that the person that is facilitating it isn't also trying to write down responses. That helps us in terms of reporting out at the end what your thoughts are to the whole group, so that we have notes on each of these. And those are the notes that we also take back with us. If you'd also like to be taking some notes down at the table, you have the backs of your paper that you'd be also giving to us. There's some other note paper on the table. You're able to draw on those maps that we'll take back with us. There's some dots if you want to put stuff on there, letting us know specific points of interest that you think that we should be looking at also. Any questions before we move to the tables? Yes?
What is the time frame for this project?
Time frame for,
Well, we have the Sandy grants, so everything, the grants terminate on May 31st, 2017, so we have to, the design standards and the ordinances have to be adopted prior to that.
Did the township receive the grant already, or
I beg your pardon?
did the township receive the
Yes.
grant money?
Yes.
What was the amount?
It is 50,000 for the design standards and 20,000 for the ordinances to accompany these design standards.
and then what happens after?
That's a tool. So the design standards would be like a master plan, and the ordinances would implement those. So that's an initiative the town is taking to revitalize the corridor.
So if a master plan is developed, and let's say it's for reconstruction, say the center divider down Highway 36, how is that funded?
Well, one of the things that would be, normally, we have to wait for property owners and developers to propose things to us. One of the steps that we could take down the road would be to look into designating some redevelopment areas along the Route 36 corridor. And a lot of that depends on how this process turns out. What do people really want to see? If people don't want to see much change, then we're probably not going to do much. We'll just wait and see what happens with property owners. If there's a lot of interest in making some more significant changes, like eliminating the barrier, making some real intersection improvements that would beautify the area, well, someone's going to have to do that, and the town's not going to pay for that. That's going to be a developer's going to pay for that. So in exchange for building something, they may have to make some other improvements that benefit the public and the community. But that's a little bit more involved. We have to possibly negotiate with the developer and create some redevelopment areas to do that. That's a next step. So it really depends on what the ideas are and what comes out of this. If they're big ideas, you have to think big and seek out developers.
And this would really be a foundation to go ahead and do the next steps. Because we can't just randomly do this. So having all of the entire corridor and these identified areas, and mostly these center areas were identified based on really the concentration of the land uses and the potential that they provide. So, getting your input would help the consultant really.
And the one thing you can't forget too is that a big component of this is storm management.
Yes.
And as I said at the beginning, one of the challenges with a lot of Route 36 is you're very small properties. If you were to try to develop one of those today, it would probably be almost impossible to meet the requirements that the state has for stormwater management and things like that. That's why the suggestion is maybe we start combining properties, give some incentives to merge properties together to make them larger and more functional. Then you can have a chance to meet the requirements that the state has imposed on developing properties nowadays. Like I said, if you have 10 acres, it's easy. If you have a quarter of an acre or half an acre on a highway, that's really, really difficult. And I'll give you a classic example. Everyone knows where Betsy Ross was, right? It's been closed for what, do you think it's a year now or so? Well, I look at that property and I say, they have no chance of ever selling that property because you can't do anything with it. It's too small. The building covers almost the whole property, right? There's about maybe 4 spaces or 5 spaces in the front. They have no chance. There's nothing that could ever work for them that'll be on the market forever because there really is no functional use for it. But we have to come up with ways to figure out, well, how can we make it realistic for that owner who worked and paid taxes on that property for their entire life, and now they finally retire, but they now can't sell the property. That's not really fair. But we have to create something to make that happen. And that's just one example of many properties along 36 that have that kind of problem.
And you know, one of the other things that's within our control, if out of here you say, oh gee, we'd like to see more residential along 36, just say hypothetically, where there's only commercial, it's within our power to rezone that, maybe to allow mixed use. That would make it easier for that property owner or a developer to come in and say, okay, I don't want to build another Betsy Ross, but I want to build maybe a mixed use development there that people would like to see there. So that we can do is sort of grease the skids to help, make that happen, by rezoning, making the land use a little bit more attractive.
And this design standards would serve the basis for rezoning in the area.
Right.
Yeah. So we need to have statutory foundation to just, we can't randomly rezone.
The other thing that design standards do is once they're established, some things like your wayfinding, things that you're looking at, or it might be facade treatments and stuff, grants become available from time to time. And when you have design standards in place, that actually bumps you up a bit to show that the town is standing behind doing something like that, or that they have a program in place. So you're kind of set yourself in a position where you're aligned to go for a grant like that. And the town is ready at that point. So you're kind of better aligned to get accepted for a grant.
Especially when you have more pedestrian friendly and we have resources, like we have the Henry Hudson Trail, or where we are taking an initiative to have more pedestrian friendly designs that would open up a lot of grants because that is what the state is moving towards, actually the whole country. Really.
What kinds of things can you do to promote consolidation of the property?
Well, a very simple option would be to say, well, let's say we allow things based upon floor area ratio. In other words, the square footage of the building is a ratio to the entire property. Let's just say, for example, it's 20%. So the building can be 20% of the property. So building here, 20% of the property, building here, 20% of the property. Then you say, well, if you combine the lots, it's 30%. So you get a little bit bigger building, so there's a little bit of a cash incentive to combine the properties. And maybe if you share parking, you get a little bit of an increase, rather than having all separate parking lots and separate driveways, as Debbie was referring to. So that's one example. There's other ways to create like incentives to combine properties.
And the other advantage would be as Tony said, the FAR, the other thing would be if you are developing individual lots, most of the lots along 36 are smaller in size. If lots get assembled or combined, building like one building, you have to maintain like a front yard setback, you have to maintain certain setbacks. When they're combined together, you can get more area of better use out of it, a better, more strong, resilient, stormwater drainage system. So it would potentially work to the advantage of the property owners as well.
You optimize the site when you do it that way. You also have a better chance of getting more open space on that property too, to have a little bit of vegetation, which you don't see along Route 36. You don't see any real street plantings or anything.
If someone has a plan to develop, because I own 2.2 acres on Route 36, I previously had my business there before I got affected with Sandy and lost a lot of cars, and I moved to Red Bank. Are there any incentives from the state if I wanted to develop that property and put something nice? Is there anything, any grants from the state at all?
The state has something called the Economic Opportunities Act, which is now on its fourth version, and I think there's a fifth one that works. And that's really the incentive, the state incentives. And there's all different degrees of incentives. You know, some areas in the state, Atlantic City being one of them, gets incentivized very heavily. Others don't. But there may be something in there that you would qualify for some sort of incentive. And typically it has to do with the number of jobs you're creating, you know, that sort of thing. Maybe redevelopment in a certain area. So you would have to see. It's very complex, but there's a whole office out there that can walk you through what you want to do and see what incentives, if any, are out there.
See, the problem I feel is that as soon as you do an improvement, your taxes are raised, and, you know, then you got to go through the town with the engineering and put up all sorts of money, that at the point, you almost say, I don't want to develop it because it costs too much money to do.
And that's state, you know, state regulations that you must go through.
Well, I'm talking about town regulations. 'Cause
Yeah, but
I've been through
they're
it
usually
before.
set by the state, and the town, you know, sort of deals with it at the local level.
The land use law determines all this process. So the township has to follow the state regulations in terms of how a property should be developed. There's a procedure to it. That's the reason.
Would there be any tax incentives from the town to develop something and spend the money that I'm willing to put my money up? Is the town going to help me out?
There's a couple of possibilities. It's not that easy to do for towns, but I mentioned redevelopment earlier. There are areas of the highway that could be designated as redevelopment areas. The towns can negotiate payment in lieu of tax pilot agreements, which basically Jersey City, pretty much all pilot agreements, and most of the urban areas that you're seeing redevelop they do payment in lieu of tax agreements, which is the tax payment is smaller to the property owner, but in essence the town gets more than it would have normally. It's a kind of a complicated system, but it's something that's doable. But you can't do it on any project. It has to be in a redeveloped area, or it has to be a project that includes affordable housing. That gives you the option to do a developer's agreement that allows you to do payment in lieu of taxes, because they're usually done with other funding programs that require those sorts of things. So there are some ways to do it, but it's not easy, and it usually is somewhat of a larger development that would get those things. Harder to do it on small 1 and 2 acre projects. That's another reason for trying to combine properties.
What I'd like to do at this time is let us start to work at the tables, and any additional questions we'll do in the last 15 minutes when we do the wrap-up. Okay, so let's get started. The way that we're going to do this is the tables all have their names on them, and Avenue D is located right outside these doors. So please look for the neighborhood that you want. Let me just see. This one is Port Common, Belfast, North Middletown, and Leonardo. Outside is Avenue D. Yes, Avenue D is the one closer to Atlantic Island. I hope you all enjoyed the process. It does move along rather quickly when you're doing it. Sometimes we're doing them for an 8-hour session, and I can't believe how fast they go when you're gathering this kind of information. But I know that the table that I was at, I was glad to see the interaction and how much we were able to get down on the maps, and just taking the notes and getting a better feel for what everybody was thinking about the area and the types of uses. We're going to just give you a quick overview from the notes that we were able to compile. One person will read out from each of the groups. This is information that we're going to be taking back with us. And it gives you just a bit of an idea of some of the information that we'll use to develop the design guidelines. I'm going to read out from the Port Monmouth table. Some of the negatives that were discussed at the beginning were how there was some vacant properties that were within the area, that there were viable uses that were operating at this time. There was a very large piece of property that had an old hurricane fence operation that was there, a vacant building and vacant land. There are a number of old buildings within this center. They consider it the poor side of town, yet they can see the socioeconomics changing. A lot more younger people coming to that area, buying homes, and they can see that the vitality of changing the retail side of it, and if you were able to bring more residential, it could actually change totally along that Route 36 strip. They were hit with over 3.5 feet of water during Sandy in those retail areas. The bike path is in need of things like bathrooms, lighting, to make people stop. There was a mention of a couple of muggings along the trails. There is increased security there. There's no sidewalks on Route 36. These are all negatives that we take into consideration as we're developing the guidelines. Some of the positives and things that we were asked to look at is capitalizing on the local traffic that comes through. Not necessarily having to get the traffic to breeze through. Having it slow down is not necessarily negative when you're in a retail business. You want the people there. Capturing people coming from the ferry and getting them to stop at the shops. Getting the residents that are local when they're on the road to make stops at these stores. Getting people that are on the bike path to utilize the uses that are going to be there, the ones that are there now also. Things that people need and want. A playhouse and other uses that could go with it. Things like restaurants or cafes, coffee houses. Actual uses that are for the person. Things like clothing stores, shoe stores, something that you don't have to go to another highway or another town to get, like going over to Targets or Kohl's to pick up type of things like this, or going to a mall that's outside of town. Potential to put solar lighting on the bike path. Uses with bathrooms that for the public that are near the trail. Maybe things like a Dunkin' Donuts or an ice cream store, or something that welcomes the public in, doesn't say if you're not a patron, don't come into our store, that type of thing. Also, combining the properties is a good idea in this area. They are probably the one neighborhood that does have the larger lot sizes to start with, so it was a good center to be talking about some of these uses, but we do see the potential of actually making this even a better center by working with the property owners together. A facade incentive program is very desirable to a number of the participants at our table. They have retail stores, they would like to be making improvements, but they don't want to be hit right away by making these improvements and having their taxes go up. They'd like to have some leeway with some type of an incentive if possible. And housing over shops is desirable to them. And then in terms of branding, a town-wide ID, but maybe with a neighborhood reference, is something that one of the people thought would be a good idea. And also, somebody mentioned looking into the historic name. At one point in time, maybe even back as far as the 1920s, Port Monmouth, Belford, and New Monmouth were a combined area.
I got the name, Shoal Harbor.
Oh, okay, Shoal Harbor. So that may be something that we can look into. And that was the Port Monmouth table. Thank you. Somebody report out on North Middletown.
All right, so North Middletown is the first stop through, Middletown Township. So there's not really an identity. So one of the things that we picked up on was introducing
introducing this maybe coastal feel and coastal aesthetics that introduce you to the Jersey Shore. So that was one of our needs, as well as introducing restaurants, since it's mainly a service or auto business related area, as well as landscaping. There's not much of it on the side, maybe a few planters here and there. And for the pro, the trail was kind of the only pro here. It would bring people, and if there's a business there, and existing businesses, to attract people off the trail to get around. But the issues mainly had to do with the intersection of Thompson Ave and Route 36, where there's a lack of sidewalks once you get across, and if you can cross with the lack of crosswalks. It's kind of a dangerous area to be crossing, and I was told by the head of the EMS that it's probably one of the most dangerous intersections in Middletown. So something to address the lack of crosswalks is definitely needed. And like before, the storage and scrap and mechanical type feel that's currently there shouldn't be kept. Try and make it so that it's a destination people want to stay at, like a restaurant and cafe, something like that. And also, we wanted to address the barrier. There's a big feel that the barrier impedes people from crossing over to the other side, and that opening that up possibly would allow people to flow across the street to the other businesses that would be located there.
So I was at the Belford table, which
Zach, it's organized by just boxes, so.
okay. I'll just speak by memory. So Belford has a lot of pros, I think, because it is a very historic neighborhood. It is the largest of the 5 centers, or at least the largest of the neighborhoods, and expands a larger area. You've got population, you have businesses, even if they're not necessarily within the center right now. So the idea would be to draw them more towards the center. We mentioned there's a lot of history to the neighborhood. You have the ferry that goes out of Belford, so that's already a big draw. And you have younger people who are using, and all types of people who are using the ferry and other uses in Belford. So it is feasible, or potentially feasible, for that center to draw those types of people who might not need large areas of land. Belford doesn't have a lot of large parcels, but that might not be an impediment necessarily. We did talk about the safety issues with crossing and the barrier along 36. There are a lot of accidents and deaths that occur along 36, but it was felt that in certain areas it might not be good to keep the barrier, whereas others, where there are major intersections, we can reduce the size of the road and allow a shorter crossing distance for pedestrians. The Henry Hudson Trail runs alongside the north part of Belford, and there's a feeling that we want to draw people from the trail into the center more and provide more access between them. Maybe create pocket parks and small restaurants and cafes, something kind of unique. I think Booskerdoo is one of the local coffee shops, having something kind of like that, and creating unique plazas for people to get off the bike path into those areas, but also have a place where younger people can live and be able to walk to those uses. And then we also talked about needing branding, both for the township and for the neighborhood, having continuous sidewalks, and just making a cleaner, nicer looking streetscape.
So I was with a great group of people out in the hallway. We were talking about Avenue D, which is right next to the Atlantic Highlands. So they talked about a lot of good things about that area. You know, there's the ferry, it's near Sandy Hook, there's restaurants, it's got the Hudson Trail that runs along the back of it. And they thought that the high-rise apartments that are going up in Atlantic Highlands would be a good thing to capitalize on for this area to kind of bring in the new customer base and revitalize. So the negatives is that the area is really dilapidated. It hasn't been rehabilitated or maintained. Some structures are really in bad shape, need to be revitalized. Some might need to be knocked down and completely rebuilt. Some might just need a little paint job, some facelift. There is issues with the floodplain in this area. Some of the buildings may need to be raised. There's a lack of crosswalks and pedestrian facilities in the area. Lighting is a big issue. It's very dark. They said needs more lighting, better crosswalks for safety. And then the Jersey barrier that separates the highway, they thought was a major issue. And they'd really like to see that turned into a grass median along the center with some landscaping. Some of the types of uses, they said, you know, the uses that are there are pretty good. There's restaurants. They'd like to see more green parks, more landscaping, potentially maybe an art center or something that could draw people into the neighborhood. But really, they were focusing on how to make this area more beautiful, to attract people. As I said, it's really an embarrassment. When people drive through, nobody wants to stop and shop here because it just looks run down. And one person even said he sends people to Route 35 instead of this way when he's giving directions. Don't drive through here. So, you know, obviously that's an issue. And we talked a lot about what kinds of incentives we could offer to help regenerate this area, whether there would be maybe reduced sales tax in the area was one idea, or offering grants to help the property owners upgrade their properties, or potentially designating an area in need of rehabilitation or redevelopment to offer pilots to give tax incentives. They did talk about there's a need to have a full intersection at County Route 516 and 36. There's a jug handle now, but it's not a full intersection. You can't turn left onto 36 from that road. So they wanted to see that full access to allow access to the other side of the road. They did note that there are some missing sections of sidewalk. Some of the properties don't have a sidewalk where others do, so there's really just a disconnect for the pedestrians. They didn't, because it's such a small area, they didn't really see a need for a theme so much as just making everything nicer, maybe some property maintenance enforcement, make sure people are cutting the grass, you know, watering their shrubs, maintaining the property, just to make it look nicer. So they thought this was a really, there's a lot of strong opportunities here that just aren't being taken advantage, and they really want to see the town come up with some kind of incentives to help foster this redevelopment or rehabilitation of this center.
And I had Leonardo. What we had talked about in Leonardo is an old community, and the people who came tonight are people who lived there for a long time. So it's a little bit different sense of a community I got that was families, you know, people's children lived there, and so it's much more of an older established community. We talked about what is Leonardo. Now everybody knows Leonardo because of the marina. So that is one thing that I guess is associated. Everybody knows that the other thing associated with Leonardo is a movie done quite some time ago. But they had talked about things like Leonardo's about family. Leonardo's about a sense of walkability and safety. Leonardo's about the fact that all the houses are different, that it's kind of unique. And they did talk about things like the fact that, you know, mom lives there, sister lives there, children live here, so that type of thing. And they also talked about its connection to the bike trail. What was interesting was that we talked about things that were bad. And there's supposedly, I don't know this, but there was supposedly a restaurant that used to be there that's no longer there that ends up being an eyesore at this point. Which also leads to, so they talked about this former restaurant, the Wild Scallion. They also talked about the motel, things that needed to be upgraded, things that needed to do, things that needed to happen in order to affect change in this particular section. But then we talked about things like things that are needed, and the things that we talked about were needed were a hotel or a B&B. One of the comments that came from some of the participants was that people stop there and say, where can I stay? And there's no place between Atlantic Highlands, there's no hotels or B&Bs that they saw that as an opportunity and a need. The other things they talked about were upgrading some of the parks in the area, doing things for children, children's center, things that are focused more towards children. And then, of course, the safer crossings, lighting of the bike trails, and sidewalks on Broadway. The other interesting thing they talked about is things that they don't want to see anymore, which is drugstores, gas stations, and banks. So it was interesting. It was an interesting discussion of pros and cons and trying to come up with a vision that lays somewhere between what they don't want or what they wouldn't want to see and what they would like to see.
Okay, so this gives us a lot of information to take back and digest and start to create our design guidelines for the neighborhoods. And as you can see, they're not all identical. We have some themes that run throughout, and then we have others that are very neighborhood-oriented, center-oriented. So as we design the guidelines, there will be some things that we're going to be calling out specifically to certain centers. And we'll be running these by the planners in town and discussing with them what our ideas are as we're developing the guidelines and proposing them for the municipality. But I thank you so much for your participation tonight. If you have any additional ideas that you think of in the next few days that you do want to pass along, we had some cards up front, or you can give them to Sam at the town, and we will still be able to incorporate them as we're working on this. If you have any additional questions, I'll be here for a little while, but thank you so much for helping us tonight.
Thank you.